Hello, I'm Esther Gido-Yort. It's Wednesday, February 2nd. This is Africa 54.
How violence is sapping faith in West African democracy. The South African luxury housing market sees a boom in sales. And a Nigerian charity teaches chess to slum kids with help from an American celebrity.
We begin in Central Africa, where at least 60 people were killed in a militia attack on Wednesday morning at a displaced persons camp in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, according to a witness and the head of a local humanitarian group. Both sources told Reuters the Codeco militia was responsible for the killings, which occurred at the Savo camp in Ituri province. The United Nations says Codeco fighters have killed hundreds of civilians in Ituri in recent years and forced thousands to flee their homes. Recent attacks have also targeted displaced persons camps. Charite Banzabavi, president of the local humanitarian group for the Bahema North area, put the death toll at 63. The UN Migration Agency says the Savo displacement site was home to about 4,000 people in December. A government spokesman could not immediately be reached for comment. State radio in Guinea-Bissau says at least 6 people were killed in a failed attempt to overthrow President Umaro Sissoco Embalo. Residents of the capital are cautiously returning to daily life. The dead in Tuesday's incident included 4 assailants and 2 members of the presidential guard. President Umaro announced on Tuesday night that the situation was under control after gunfire rang out for more than 5 hours near a government compound where he was holding a cabinet meeting. It remains unclear who was behind the attack, which Embalo says was not only a failed coup, but an assassination attempt. The West African country, which has a population of about 2 million, has now seen 10 coups or attempted coups since independence from Portugal in 1974. The recent coup in Burkina Faso follows military takeovers in Guinea and Mali, as civilian administrations are being blamed for a failure to tackle a rise in insurgent violence. David Oyo has more.
The last time soldiers attempted to overthrow Burkina Faso's government, Marcel Tankuano took to the streets to oust the junta. That was 2015. Within days, loyalist forces had restored the president to power. Last week, Tankuano was on the streets again. But this time, he was welcoming new military leaders and celebrating the coup that ousted a democratically elected president.
In the situation of Burkina Faso, at the moment it is necessary to be clear. We need a military regime. In 6 years, what these gentlemen have done to our country is serious. Very serious. There is no more dignity, no honor, and our country is one of integrity.
He says we have to rethink democracy, and that democracy in the West is not the same as democracy here. His view fits into disenfranchisement across West Africa's Sahel. Militant violence has escalated over the past decade. Thousands have been killed, millions displaced. Under-equipped armies have struggled to fight back, and blame has largely fallen on civilian administrations, who have also been tarnished by public perceptions of corruption. Emboldened by popular support, militaries in Guinea and Mali have also taken matters into their own hands, reversing democratic gains that had seen West Africa shed its image as a coup belt. Aziz Diallo is the mayor of Dori in Burkina Faso's northeast. The town has tripled in size, he says, as people fled attacks in nearby villages. Because of insecurity and death threats, he spends most of his time in the capital, Ouagadougou.
Today, logic would have it that in order to defend democracy, one must oppose this coup d'etat. But the context in which they are has taken over the values on which they are based. It is this feeling of anxiety and despair that has made this coup welcome as a source of hope for a better future among this battered population.
The military takeovers are a concern for international partners such as France and the United States. They have troops in the Sahel fighting insurgents and fear greater instability. But for those caught in the middle of the bloodshed, democracy may not be the priority.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. South Africa's luxury housing dealers say the market is booming despite the economic damage from the coronavirus pandemic. Real estate agents say the need to work from home and have better security are some of the drivers, while affordable housing for the poor remains a challenge. Linda Giftash reports from Johannesburg.
South Africa's luxury real estate market saw an unexpected boom in 2021 despite the country's broader economic woes. Property analytics firm Lightstone reported that the luxury market experienced a 6-year high in total purchase value of transfers. Realtors say the pandemic has played a role in inspiring homebuyers to go big.
Because everybody is now working from home, everything has changed. People now need almost like a study for every individual in the home. So if you have 2 teenagers and 2 adults, you actually need 4 workspaces now because they all end up working from home.
She says backup electricity sources and updated internet infrastructure are among the amenities buyers are demanding. They're also considering the many ways they use their homes from work to play.
People now need double the reception space because you want a facility where various parts of the family can have gatherings going on at the same time. Also, very importantly, is the inside-outside feel.
Still, the housing landscape is feeling the effects of the pandemic. The country has seen jobless rates top 35%. It's led to people selling their houses, downsizing, and even moving in with other family.
We actually saw a deterioration in the number of sales in South Africa. In fact, we saw about a 15% deterioration in the number of sales from the preceding year. And we're down about 50% from the decade prior to that. So ultimately what we need is job recovery in order to encourage demand, both on the rental and on the for sale side of the property market.
Dickens says vacancy rates in city centers have been on the rise since the pandemic began. At the same time, the country has a massive housing shortage. The Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa reports a shortfall of 3.7 million homes, and that gap is expected to grow by 178,000 homes every year. It means 20% of urban households are in informal settlements. Government housing isn't being built fast enough, and older houses in communities like Soweto are rapidly falling apart.
As a pastor, I'm crying because this is not the only houses that looks like this. There are even others that is also worse. Even if we could have money, we would have built our own places. But because people, they don't have jobs, so even myself, I'm not working. My wife is not working. You see, so really we are not fine. We are not okay.
The result is a landscape of extremes, with slums and informal settlements on one end and luxury homes on the other.
So the decreasing upper middle class will retreat into compounds behind fences, privatized estates, and sometimes even privatized cities. But that's only sustainable in the medium term. That's not long-term sustainability.
The long-term outlook on the housing market is unclear while the effects of the pandemic are played out. Experts say only economic growth and a drop in unemployment rates will improve the landscape. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Johannesburg.
A Nigerian charity that teaches chess to children living in the country's informal housing is receiving a boost from American socialite Paris Hilton. The media personality's tweets this month have helped the group known as Chess in Slums raise more than $100,000 to expand its program. Timothy Obiezu reports from Lagos.
Arrive in the Oshodi slum community in Lagos, Nigeria for an important assignment. Nigerian chess master Tunde Onakoya and his team at Chess in Slums Africa have been teaching chess here since 2018. Onakoya says the idea is to give kids a better chance at education and in life through chess.
One of my favorite chess analogies is in that innate ability of a pawn in the game of chess to become a queen. So this is deeply reflective in what we're trying to do with Chess and Slums, right? To show that beyond the stories of poverty, right, every child has potential to become so much more.
Oshodi is one of the most dangerous slum communities in Lagos State, with a history of organized gangs, armed robbery, and street violence, making it difficult for kids to thrive. Onokoya's initiative is to change the negative stories with positive thinking and education. He says more than 500 kids from various slums have benefited from his Chess and Slums Africa program, and that the initiative keeps growing.
We started having success stories. A lot of the children we trained started getting scholarship opportunities. They started getting, it now became a gateway to life-changing opportunities for them. Their stories were celebrated in international media, made global headlines.
18-year-old Ojo Ayomide enrolled with the team months ago and is already dreaming big.
I want to be a chess master. Even though I'm a musician. So I can sing. Maybe they want to help me to take me to studio, and I will be going to school.
This month, the initiative gained traction after Paris Hilton, the American socialite and businesswoman, retweeted a notice about the program and joined the campaign to raise $1 million for the project.
Once she did that, Tony and I got in a lot of meetings, and we were like, okay, how do we set up a global ambassadorship project? Because now that Paris Hilton is doing this, we can kind of present the ability to be a global ambassador to her. And that's kind of like the next step, is making sure we have global ambassadors either for fundraising.
For now, Onokoya and his team say with more funds, they will be expanding the Chess and Slums Africa initiative with the goal of reaching 1 million underprivileged African children over the next 10 years. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Lagos, Nigeria.
Let us know what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a Kenyan fintech startup seeks to address the credit gap impacting the continent's small and medium enterprises. We'll be right back.
Be sure to join me for the next Straight Talk Africa. We'll look at the future of finding work in Africa. With a generation of young Africans more educated and more unemployed than ever before, what and where are the jobs of the future? Also, higher education with a higher purpose. We'll take you inside a one-of-a-kind African university that says it's cultivating future African leaders who will transform the continent. Join me, Hayley Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Empowerment and humanity towards a better world.
Economic and social progress of every society.
Facts and information from key players rather than spectators in politics, business, science and technology.
City, rural, educated, all underprivileged. We care and we listen to what matters to you.
Your voices are our voices.
Several NATO member states are sending troops and hardware to allies in Eastern Europe as tensions with Russia escalate. The United States has put several thousand troops on alert. Moscow has over 100,000 troops stationed on the border with Ukraine, and the West fears an imminent Russian invasion, which the Kremlin denies. Henry Ridgwell looks at NATO's military response and what it means for the brinkmanship between Moscow and the Western alliance.
A show of solidarity. 4 Danish F-16 fighter jets landed in Lithuania last week to bolster NATO's air policing mission in the Baltic. Since Russia's forceful annexation of Crimea in 2014, NATO has deployed around 5,000 troops in Eastern Europe in what the alliance terms an enhanced forward presence. The US has put an additional 8,500 troops on standby.
I'll be moving US troops to Eastern Europe and the NATO countries in the near term.
France announced plans to deploy hundreds more troops to Romania, while Spain, the Netherlands and Germany are also considering sending more troops, aircraft and warships. Britain has supplied around 2,000 anti-tank weapons to Ukraine and is expected to offer further deployments to NATO allies this week.
I think it's important when it comes to military deployment that we signal to President Putin that the very thing he fears, which is more NATO closer to Russia, would be a consequence of a strategic error of invading a sovereign country such as Ukraine.
NATO has no plans to deploy combat troops to Ukraine.
Those NATO troops that are in those border states are really there more for preparedness and for a defensive and deterrence capability, rather than the expectation for direct conflict or direct combat.
NATO says it is responding to Russian aggression. Moscow called the response hysteria. Russia has around 100,000 troops deployed close to the Ukrainian border. Thousands more arrived in Belarus for joint military exercises this week.
NATO itself has had to respond to a new threat that Russia posed by putting additional forces into Belarus, which of course shares a border with Poland, Latvia and Lithuania, which are NATO allies.
NATO's deployments could ratchet up tensions further with Russia's president, says Norman.
One of Putin's key demands in all of this is the drawdown of NATO troops and weaponry from those same eastern states. So the fact that there is more buildup there is going to be seen not as an act of defense, but an act of offense and provocation by Russia.
Meanwhile, the flurry of diplomatic efforts to avoid war continues. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson is due to visit Ukraine this week and hold talks on the phone with Russia's president. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
As the U.S. reinforces its allies against what it describes as a Russian threat to invade Ukraine, President Joe Biden has approved sending additional forces to Eastern Europe, according to two U.S. officials who spoke to Reuters on Wednesday. For more on the tense situation between Russia and Ukraine, I'm joined live from Kiev by Philip Crowther, international affiliate reporter with AP Global Media Services. Philip, tell us the latest on the U.S. troops being moved to the area.
Look, you already heard in that report a mention of those 8,500 U.S. troops on high alert already. These are not the troops being deployed to Europe. 2,000 additional U.S. troops are going to Poland and Germany. And let's go through those numbers. 1,700 U.S. troops going to Poland. There's already a 4,000-strong U.S. contingent in the country. 300 U.S. troops will be going to Germany. 35,000 are in that country already at this point. Now, all of those 2,000 troops will be coming from Fort Bragg in the United States, and in addition to that, 1,000 U.S. troops will be moving from Germany to Romania. So those are the latest troop deployments announced by the Biden administration. It is, by the way, insisting that these troops, first of all, are not going to be there permanently, that they are not going to be here in Ukraine, and that they will not be fighting a war in Ukraine. This is seen as a reassurance on behalf of the Biden administration for Ukraine, yes, in part, but more than anything for Eastern European countries with a border to Russia.
Clearly, the international community is alarmed about the likelihood of Russia invading Ukraine. What are you learning from Ukrainian officials?
Look, speaking of troop increases, there is going to be one here in Ukraine as well. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that there will be an increase of 100,000 Ukrainian troops in the next 3 years. So this is a military that is getting bigger. Is it good enough, though, to be able to beat a massive Russian military with over 100,000 troops on the border with Ukraine, but also on the border between Belarus and Ukraine? Most experts would say absolutely not, especially not if there was to be an air campaign included. Of course, at this point, all of that is speculation. Nobody knows what exactly Russian President Vladimir Putin is going to decide he will do next, and he's very much the one who will be making that decision. Now, the Ukrainian military would, though, say that it is much better prepared than it was in 2014. That is when Russia annexed Crimea and when Russian-backed separatists took over large parts of the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. Now, that's what's happening on the military side here in Ukraine. When it comes to diplomacy, let me take you back to some of what Ukrainian President Zelensky said yesterday during his press conference with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson here, using the future tense when he talked about war. He said this is going to be a European war. This is going to be a fully fledged war. Those are some pretty daunting prospects coming from the Ukrainian president here in Kiev.
And Philip, Russian President Vladimir Putin has spoken for the first time in a very long time. Was there any hope of de-escalation in what he said?
Well, look, just about, because it's essentially a case of choose your headline from what the Russian president said during his press conference at the Kremlin. He did say that he was open to further talks that might lead to de-escalation. That's the positive side of this. But he also reiterated again that, in his view, the West, NATO, including the United States, completely ignored Russia's top security concerns. And let me take you through those that were entirely rejected by the United States and NATO. First of all, for them never to accept Ukraine inside of NATO, that was rejected quite forcefully. But also the request from Russia for NATO troops to disappear from Eastern Europe, essentially, and for offensive weapons to be taken away from the border between Ukraine and Eastern European countries where there is a NATO troop or weapon presence. That's why we are in the situation we are in. That's why diplomacy is not advancing right now. Now, there's going to be a phone call today between British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Vladimir Putin. Maybe there'll be a bit of movement there, but we have no knowledge at this point of any further real high-level talks. Now, those would happen between the United States and Russia. Nothing planned on that front at this point.
Philip, thanks. Philip Crowther is an international affiliate reporter with AP Global Media Services. He joined us live from Kiev, Ukraine. Kenyan fintech startup Aslimia is on a mission to build a digital financial infrastructure for small businesses through an affordable, easy-to-use digital payments platform to address the credit gap impacting the continent's small and medium enterprises. Nairobi-based Aslimia recently secured $2 million to grow its team, deliver new services, and expand into new markets across the region. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho spoke to Tekwane Mwendwa, co-founder and CEO of Aslimia.
Tekwane Mwendwa, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul, for having me. Looking forward to talking about the great things we're doing at Aslimia and why it matters.
You've been very, very instrumental in trying to set a platform that enables a lot of people to do their thing. You recently raised some good money through seed funding. What are you going to do with that money?
We raised quite $2 million, and the whole idea with this particular funding round is for us to scale up. So we're looking to hire quite a bit of data scientists to help us process the data that small businesses are inputting into our system. We're looking at launching a new service or product around lending, where we'll be able to enable the small businesses that are recording their sales in our product to be able to kind of borrow capital, and then also expansion outside of the capital city. So currently we've been operating in Nairobi, and we're looking into opening up other markets in Kenya.
I've seen a lot of startups in Kenya, a lot of people in the fintech industry trying to do pretty much the same thing that you're doing, but you seem to offer something different. What's that?
We focus on a very niche market that has been neglected for a very long time. So micro MSMEs, or what you would call them informal traders, have been always bundled up together with the mass consumers. So basically you have a lot of fintechs doing P2P wallets for the mass majority. If you talk about things like M-Pesa, if you talk about mobile money in other African countries, it tends to be built for the general public. But when you go further down on the long tail, micro SMEs are neglected by the tech companies, banks, financial institutions. And what we've done differently is that we've said we want to solve a problem that hasn't been solved before, and for a consumer that has been heavily neglected when it comes to the tech products they have access to and the financial services as well that they can have access.
If I hear you correctly, you're trying to tap into that market, but how are you going to do it? Already there is a problem of people being skeptical about this kind of technology. Yeah, you're saying you're trying to offer a product that can serve these people better. How are you going to convince these people to maybe to buy into some of the products that you're offering them?
Informal businesses, just because they're informal doesn't mean they lack the savviness of a business owner. And anywhere in the world, business people are very savvy when it comes to doing the right things for their business. And just because of our Android application does the right thing for their business, one, we save them 90% of mobile money fees. Secondly, we enable them to keep track of what is coming into their business and going out of their business. When we go to the markets, we thought one of the biggest problems we'd have is around smartphones. But what we realize is that informal business owners are actually the early adopters of smartphones, because the first application they enjoy and love using is the calculator. We've seen that, one, they have the savviness, they have the interest, and then they have the infrastructure that can install our Android application to work.
What makes Kenya a very attractive market for investors? You are probably one of the few people who has gotten funding this year. There are a lot of other people in Kenya who have attracted funding. What makes that market a very, very unique to attract foreign investors?
Why not Kenya? But if you look at some recently released data, is that Kenya is the 6th richest country in Africa. We're able to compete with the big boys. So the result of that is because, one, of the political stability, safety, infrastructure, where data is one of the cheapest across the continent. The penetration of mobile phones is at almost 100% at the moment. M-Pesa really unlocked and connected the country in a way that it's not been possible in other countries, where a person in the most remote part of Kenya can pay for their electricity bill, can pay for a product online without necessarily having to send the money by a bus. So you find that mixture of good infrastructure, political stability, and the human capital being able to execute just kind of brings it to be a country that is quite easy and good to invest in.
Interesting stuff. I wish you all the best. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul, and let me know when you come to Nairobi.